I met Noah when I was, I think, about 18. I was in the army. I've heard about her before. She was quite well known already then. She was known as somebody who has invented a language for dance. So our friendship was more, if you want, intellectual. Noah was one of the most cultured person and certainly one of the cleverest person that ever was. I was in Italy. The Yom Kippur War broke. It was a horrible war between Israel and all the Arab countries around. She had one male dancer in her group, and he went to the army, of course. And she said, he's in the army, and of course, until this war is over, it's so horrible. We're not going to dance. I can't do anything. I just sit at home. But something very strange happened to me. And I didn't know what to do with myself, so I decided to take some pieces of fabric and make some composition, some collage from these pieces of fabric. She was always very interested in painting, but she couldn't paint. She said she couldn't paint. And so she played around with these pieces of fabrics just to pass the time. Her obsession with the wall carpets, with the compositions, with the pieces of fabric was something that she couldn't share. It was a private thing, a private way of expression for her, which she couldn't explain. And she couldn't explain it, being such an analytical person. She said, because I can't explain, I don't know why I'm doing this and not that. And it's not an analytical thing that I can make a system out of it. I can't share it with anybody. In that respect, I was the only person who was really very close to that part of her world. Her first experiments at home with what she found at home, pieces of material, and she realized that there is something that is very exciting for her in this way of composing with form and color. For her, it was like painting. As she was such an analytical person, she realized that quite from the beginning, that the infinite richness of the world of fabrics is so enormous that she had to make rules for herself. And her first rule was that she would not cut any pieces. She was only using scraps of material. And she would not buy anything, of course. She would not cut. There were certain images on fabrics that she would not use. For example, fabrics which had people painted on them or animals. But the main thing was that she used the material, the fabrics, as material that she has to deal with and not dictate it to her own will. She used what was found. The only thing she did do is sometimes she would take apart pieces of clothing, not cut them, but take apart. And in some of her carpets, you can see, for example, skirts that were taken apart, or umbrellas that were broken, but never cutting. I don't do anything. It's the material that dictates to me what to do. In this respect, it is very parallel to what she was doing in movement, because she said, I'm not inventing anything. I mean, the movements are there. I'm using the human body to explore what is possible. And it dictates to me what my compositions would be. Now, in the beginning, she thought she would stitch herself, but her production was so enormous that very quickly, of course, she couldn't stitch herself, and she needed people to do this technical thing of stitching the pieces together. We tried to find mechanical ways of doing it, but it was impossible to do it. It had to be stitched by hand. But it was not a communal work in the way some people imagine it. The carpets were made totally by Noah. What other people did was, because Noah had no time, because she kept doing more and more and more as she was obsessed. And she had no time to sew, because the sewing takes a lot of time. But the sewing was done by people around her, which were some of her students, some of her dancers, some of her friends. She said, "Why don't you stitch?" I said, "But I've never held a needle in my life." She said, "Try, it's very simple." And I became obsessed with stitching. And I stitched hundreds of her carpets. It became like meditation. It's the most marvelous thing